Dr. Michelle Lusardi, welcome to Tuesdays with Mike. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Very, very well.
Excellent. Well, we're blessed to have you on, and I'm so excited to get to learn more about you, your story, have our listeners be exposed to the contributions that you have made and are continuing to make to the field. So, if you're ready, we'll get started right away.
Okay.
All
Okay.
right. So, the first question that I've got for you is an interesting one because if I understand your journey, you started off with a degree of interest in pediatrics. And I don't see that you've done a lot in pediatrics, but it appears to me to be a very beautiful story and an expression of our profession that your journey has traveled from an interest in pediatrics, which got you into it through orthotics, prosthetics, geriatrics, neuro rehab, and then, curiously enough, a doctoral degree in family systems, never settling on just one interest and finding passions everywhere. Help us understand a little bit about that journey and pathway until a final culmination in a foray into geriatrics here.
Okay. I originally was thinking about going to medical school, but then met my husband and decided that was too many years before we could get married. So a good friend of his was interested in physical therapy and introduced me to the profession. So I applied and was accepted at Downstate Medical Center, part of the SUNY system in New York.
Mhm.
At the time, there were no PT programs in New Jersey where I was from, so I was able to go, relatively inexpensively in the New York State systems. And I'm old enough that the kind of therapeutic exercise that we did were uh, was sort of a competition between PNF and NDT.
Okay.
Those were the big things then. And if you were an advocate of one, you were not an advocate of the other. There was this competition. So um, at Downstate, we were PNF informed and had
Mm,
very little training in NDT at the time. And my first job was in a BOCES school out in Port Jefferson, New York, while my husband was finishing his graduate degree. And it was a NDT place. And I didn't fit.
okay.
And I was, very young and was not effective as a pediatric physical therapist. It was a
Okay.
painful year.
Wow.
Um, when Lara finished his grad work, we moved to Connecticut because that's where he got a job with the state legislature. And I was blessed to um, find a position at Hartford Hospital, which was a huge, over 1,100 beds. Yes. It was a huge hospital. It was a
Yeah.
huge teaching hospital, and the PT department was really expanding. So rotated through all the different services, and we, you know, I did ortho, I did neuro. We had an inpatient neuro floor. I did outpatient there, and slowly but surely, it dawned on me that the people that I enjoyed the most happened to be older. I loved hearing their
Okay.
life stories. I loved helping them see possibilities to recover their life because
Yeah.
at that time, this is back in the mid to late 70s. Stroke was a devastating thing,
Yeah.
um, and people were very disabled by their events, and so being able to help them figure out how to move was and enjoy their function was so rewarding, and I really
Nice.
loved it. While at Hartford, we did a lot of continue education, and um, I was one of the folks that helped out on the weekend programs. And Greg Johnson and Vicky Saliba from the Institute of Physical Art, PNF folks at the
Okay.
time, came several times a year to teach PNF, and they noticed I was around a lot and that I was working on my skills, and so eventually joined their faculty to go and teach continuing education PNF.
Yeah.
So that I got the sort of bitten by the teaching bug. They're such effective instructors.
Hmm.
And that led to an offer from the University of Connecticut to come in and fill in for someone on sabbatic. They needed someone to plug into the PNF piece. And
Yeah.
by then NDT and PNF were not diametrically opposed to each other. So we were beginning to integrate movement.
Right.
So I did, and the person who I was substituting for extended her sabbatic. So I got to stay a full year, and I loved being in the classroom.
Wow.
They were looking for a neuro faculty. I was bachelor's prepared, didn't have a master's in anything, and they couldn't find someone. So I said, listen, you know me, I'll go back to school.
Yeah.
And uh, went back to school while I was teaching full time, did a master's in allied health education, and then the geriatrics program was actually housed in the School of Family Studies. So that's why
Okay.
I ended up there. I had a very interesting chairman for my doctoral committee who didn't quite understand healthcare. So I did
Uh-huh.
a lot of educating
Uh-huh.
of my committee members and such, but looked at the relationship between the fear of falling and the risk of falling in my dissertation, learned how not to do research. I think that's what dissertations are all about. um, Finished and was tenured 3 days before my uh, contract expired. I had to get the PhD done
Wow.
in order to get tenured. And then thought I was going to settle in for a long career at UConn
Hmm.
until I met Mike Emery, who was starting a problem-based learning program at Sacred Heart.
Okay.
And he convinced me to jump ship, basically. And I was at both places for about 15 years, but Sacred Heart
Really?
is my is my spiritual home, let me say, in terms of
Okay.
being a physical therapist. We had an incredible starting faculty. It was very, very creative, and I loved it there. I absolutely loved
Huh.
it there. I worked with Mike Emery, with Pamela Vangie, um, Donna Bowers, who's the peds
Yeah.
person. She and
Yeah.
I were responsible for the neuro semester, and
Mhm.
she was NDT trained. I was PNF trained. We finished each other's sentences. I mean, if we were like click, we just
Wow.
absolutely clicked. And I so enjoyed problem-based learning. Very, very time intensive for both students and faculty. That's the downside of it. But watched critical thinking and true empathy just blossom. The students didn't like it in the very first year of the program because we weren't telling them what they needed to know. We
Hmm.
were trying to facilitate their
Right.
discovery of what they needed to know. But by the time they left for the clinic, they were amazing,
Yeah.
amazing. And I
That's
still keep in
excellent.
touch with many, many, many of the students that I had. Uh,
Yeah.
and decided to retire probably a little bit early because the university's administration wanted us to drastically increase class size without increasing faculty numbers or
Hmm.
resources. And I was getting burned out. It was very
Yeah.
intensive. And so I went back and did a transitional DPT to make sure I was
Hmm.
current because you
Yeah.
know how you get siloed in stuff. So,
Yeah.
brushed up on my pharmacology and all that stuff and went back to home care.
Yeah.
Um, and then my husband retired and we had the opportunity to move from Connecticut away from snow down here to South Carolina. Um, and actually went away from PT for probably 6 or 8 years,
Uh-huh.
got involved in nonprofits, but down here, but felt a little bit rudderless.
Hmm.
So contacted Kathy and said, I want back in. Kathy Sherlick said, I want back in. Do you have a need? What can I do?
Yeah.
And she, there were a couple task forces that she was able
Yeah.
to help me and
Yeah.
stuff.
Now, two quick things on that because it's a wonderful story. Tell me where in there did you decide to get your doctoral degree and why in family systems?
Well, I had to get the degree to get hired full time at
Yeah.
UConn. That was a
Yeah.
condition.
Okay.
Um, and luckily, I was at that point a lecturer, so I was able to attend grad school at UConn. If I had been an assistant professor, the rules were that I couldn't study at UConn.
Yeah.
And I knew that geriatrics was my thing by that point,
Yeah.
and that's where geriatrics gerontology was.
Right.
The um, we had a pepper center that those
Oh,
don't
sure.
exist anymore,
Blood
but we had a
pepper,
pepper
right? Yep.
center,
Hmm. Yeah.
and I applied for a fellowship and got one. So that helped support the cost of at least
Okay.
1 year of grad school.
So that
Um,
makes it more clear because I had heard you you got a degree in allied health education, but that was a separate program from your family systems program,
right,
right?
that was a master's degree.
Right. That's what I thought I heard. So we have bachelor's, master's, doctorate, and transitional doctorate, correct?
Correct. I'm a crazy
That's
person. What
incredible.
can I say?
That's great.
So,
Okay, so that's a massive amount right there. That's wonderful. And it really, again, speaks to exactly what I was hoping to see that individuals can find themselves in many different clinical and non clinical and different subspecialties within physical therapy. You embody that very well. And along that journey, Michelle, for just a moment, I'd like to call out some of the very sizable stepping stones that you've taken along the way. And this blew me away just to understand that you've got 4 degrees. And I think it's correct to say that all 4 of those would be terminal degrees because at the time the bachelor's was, and at the
mhm.
time master's was, obviously doctoral and transitional as well, terminal degrees that could be taken to task on that. But you have also studied at some very impeccable universities. You started off at State University, which has a great reputation. You've been at MGH, you've been at UConn, you've done research with Mary Tinetti, Richard Bohannon. Tell us a little bit about some of the stepping stones, the colleagues, and the facilities you've been at so we understand a little bit about your story in that regard, if you would.
Well, Richard was a colleague at UConn,
Mhm.
and we started. I started, I think, a year before he did, and you know, when he came to us, he had just finished his doctoral degree, and he was already a researcher extraordinaire. Very interesting, however, Richard didn't have much, or doesn't have much, uh, interest in putting up with the grantsmanship role.
Okay.
Most of his research is either unfunded or funded by smaller, uh, smaller local grants and that
Right.
kind of thing. He also is such a prolific writer, and I knew that I needed to learn how to write. So uh, I tapped him on the shoulder one day at a faculty meeting and said, "Can you help?" And so he would task me with doing pieces of some of his writing work. so that I would learn the process, build a skill and learn the process. And I also wrote with Rita Wong a bit. Um, and when I got to Sacred Heart, I wrote with Pam Levangie a bit.
Mm,
So, it was, we, Richard held my hand and taught me the ropes. And I
yeah,
am forever grateful of
yeah.
that. Um, but interestingly, where the writing and the early editorship stuff came in was I was assigned to teach the orthotics and prosthetics content. And I wasn't an expert. I had treated folks, but I wasn't an expert. And I used to haunt when all the publishers were in the same row at CSM years ago. I
Yeah,
used to haunt that row saying, "Where's a good orthotics and prosthetics
yeah.
textbook?" And finally, after a number of years, an editor that I had talked to a number of times turned to me and said, "Why don't you write it? You know what you want." And I sort of said, "Oh." And at the time, the the master's program in allied health was developing an O&P tract. And so the director of that program was a former faculty member that I had studied with. So I went and said, "Do you think we could do this together?" Neither
Mm,
of us had any idea what we were getting ourselves into. We were with Butterworth for the first edition, and
mm,
and they also just helped us along,
hmm.
made it as painless as possible. But we were able to recruit O&P experts from New England Children's Hospital, which is now a hangar
Oh,
facility.
sure.
Um, and they were taking the master's degree. So some of them did that the first their chapters as their master's thesis kind of thing. So we
Makes
were
sense.
all helping each other
Yeah,
out. And it was published just after I transitioned to Sacred Heart. And I'm proud to say is now in its fifth edition. I'm no longer involved, but
yeah.
Kevin Choi, who was my research
Okay.
partner
Yeah,
at Sacred Heart, has taken it on and got it uh, through the fifth edition. So
yeah,
it's
yeah,
a wonderful legacy. I'm so proud of that book, even though I'm
yeah.
not involved
Well, you
anymore.
should be. My goodness. Yeah. And how did it come to pass that you would conduct research with Mary Tenay?
Well, I didn't actually work with Mary. I worked more a little bit with Tom Gill, who was her research partner.
Okay.
And they were doing a study on detecting early signs of frailty, and Sacred Heart was one of their testing sites.
Hmm.
So a former UConn student happened to have moved down to the area, and we recruited her to be the uh, uh, Lisa was the hands-on person for the research
Mm.
that Tom and Mary were doing at Sacred Heart.
Okay.
So I
Yeah.
I I know Mary a little bit.
Hmm.
We've met a number of times, but we didn't actually work together.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but
That's
used her
still,
work.
yeah, we
Yeah.
all have. Yes. Whether some of the younger professionals know it or not, we all have. Yes. Yeah.
Hmm.
So that's a fabulous understanding of your journey, a beautiful pathway with clear symbiosis and many colleagues. And as you mentioned, Sacred Heart is your spiritual home as far as education, but you've had many touch points along the way. I'm intrigued about some of the sentiments and comments that you made in your 2023 Carol B. Lewis lectureship. And again, congratulations on receiving that very distinguished lectureship. You did an impeccable job in your delivery on that. I just learned today that you were very sleep deprived going into it, and I can assure you it did not show. But you beautifully balanced a couple of things that are very difficult to do. And I think they can be too easily taken for granted. That your work has very clearly expressed an interest and importance and respect for evidence. And while doing that, you actually beautifully balanced in that lecture the importance of applying evidence in a person specific manner,
Hmm.
considering bio, psycho, social. And sometimes we can just let that three-syllabic word just roll out of our tongues and forget what it actually means. Michelle, help our audience understand your passion for the marriage of these two and your understanding and appreciation for evidence balanced with person specific. Take as much time as you prefer.
Hmm. Well, I think I owe a great deal of recognition of the importance of what the person and their situation um, is to family studies
Okay.
because as part of the foundational work, we had to look at uh, the core courses were on individual development,
Mhm.
um, over the lifespan, not only the physical development that
Right.
that PTs tend to focus on, but also the cognitive and the emotional development
Hmm.
of individuals across the lifespan. What are the key things that people are thinking about at different stages of the lifespan. We
Right.
also had to understand how families work, which is something, that I really didn't think about. I thought a family was a family for a lot of times. I really never
Okay.
thought that families could be so complex and different in the way
Hmm.
they managed
Right.
supporting each other, stress, all of those things. Um, and I've always been interested in physical function and how we assess what's possible, how we assess our outcomes, all of those
Hmm.
things. So
Yeah.
those three pieces just seem, after I finished school and was reflecting a bit, seem to fit together in a way. Um, I have also worked with some very remarkable individuals who were my patients
Hmm.
over the years. And
Right.
um, one woman in particular had a bad stroke again years
Hmm.
ago
Hmm.
before TPAs and stuff were available. Um, and she had been a good hands class rider, dressage rider. And I
Hmm.
saw her, she hired me as a private pay PT
Okay.
because her spasticity was so incredible. And so I saw her twice a week to
Hmm.
stretch her out and that kind of stuff. This is sort of a funny and a little bit long-winded story, but I love to
That's
tell it.
fine. That's fine. I'm interested in this.
She loved antiques, and all of her beds in her home were rope beds.
Rope
So,
beds.
that you have to tighten with the little widgety thing.
Okay. All
Okay.
right. Okay.
And we'd get on the bed to do our exercises and stretches and roll into each other because the bed wasn't firm.
Yeah.
So I said, we need to get on the floor and work on the floor. And she
Uh-huh.
hadn't been down to the floor in years. So we figured out how to get down to the floor. Um, and she hated it, but she mastered it. And
Okay.
one day she was working, she kept the books for her husband's veterinary practice, and she was working at a roll
Okay.
top desk, sitting on a folding chair. And her bottom slipped off the folding chair, and she ended up in the cubby underneath it.
Okay.
Because we had been working on moving on the floor, she figured out how to get out from the cubby and rolled herself into the living room to where we got down from her sofa
Yeah.
and got herself up. And she called me immediately and said, "You won't believe what I just did." And the next week, when I arrived, she was in her rose garden on the ground tending her roses for the first time in 4 or 5 years because she knew she could get up. And that empowerment struck me really hard. And that's where the fear of falling and risk of falling thing came from for my dissertation.
Yes.
And was probably the root of, you got to think about what people really want to do when you're
Yeah.
interacting with them, using your knowledge, using the best evidence to help them meet the goals that they have. Even if you think sometimes that that goal might not be a reachable one, if it's
Yeah.
important to them, you got to at least try.
Amazing. And so you, as a sheer function of environment, you guys found yourselves on the floor. This opportunity afforded her uh, and you a chance to prehabilitate or even be task specific for her capacity to get up from the floor before she even knew it was going to be task specific. She had this wealth of motor control of I can do this that she used in a time of crisis when she had fallen, and now she leans into it even farther and re-engages in an avocation, a hobby of gardening. That's a beautiful story.
She actually, her next goal was to get back up on her horse. And her husband built her a set of stairs, and we got her back up on her horse. Unfortunately, it wasn't the same experience. She couldn't control the horse with her legs the way that she had been.
Okay.
So she didn't really ride again, but she met her goal of getting back up to see whether she could.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a beautiful story. Thank you for helping us to understand that and see that. And that I think does a great job of exactly what you're saying. And it embodies evidence is important, task specificity is important, environment is important, salience, meaningfulness to this individual, and also recognizing the person themselves. You've done all of that by helping us to understand that story. Do you have any advice for people that are practicing clinicians now that would just be a couple bullet points that you would say, um, here's how to be able to capture evidence and person when you're struggling as a new graduate or inexperienced therapist? Any advice or points that you would make?
I I think that right now the the growing awareness of the geriatric 5Ms
Oh, yes.
is a way to um, sort through all the puzzle pieces.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm blessed to be working on a part of a task force that the Academy of Geriatrics put together to look at movement systems.
Yeah.
And we've developed a movement framework for older adults that we've got a couple of papers out on. Um, and it, it's a it's a way to incorporate the 5Ms into figuring out, we're the mobility experts,
Right.
but it's a way to think about how medication impacts on movement, how
Yeah.
someone's uh, cognition and emotion impact on movement,
Hmm. Hmm.
on their multi-complexity, not just their medical multi-complexity, but
Yeah.
their social and environmental complexity impacts on
Yeah.
movement.
Hmm.
And then anchor it on what matters most to the person.
Yeah.
So that thinking about the 5Ms, investigating the 5Ms, is probably a way to jumpstart awareness
Yeah.
about that.
Michelle, I have interviewed a lot of individuals over the course of this podcast and just in speaking and interacting with colleagues over 35 years. I just want to call out for a second what you just did right there when I asked you an unexpected question, spoke extemporaneously on what could be very challenging. You brought that back in such a beautiful manner to a practical framework that can help people. And to reiterate those five M's, it is mind or mentation. You mentioned again cognition, capacities there, and mental set, attitude. Mobility, we're the mobility experts. Medications, you mentioned. Multi-complexity, understanding what are the different dynamics going on in this individual's world. And you brought it back to matters most, the fifth M. And again, in no specific order, but always understanding there again grabs your person first in every one of those. And also, evidence is embodied in each one of those as well. Thank you for that response. I very much appreciate what you just did there, and it would be um, too easy to pass up what you just did. Thank you. I've got one final question for you in our time together, and I'm just interested across the diversity of contributions that you have gifted to our field and profession. And again, I don't mean to put any of this in past tense as chapter closed, book closed. I recognize you are still involved and continue to gift because I believe, if I understand correctly, you initiated some of the discussions that we should have a movement systems framework in geriatrics, wherein it had been, let's say, birthed in other specialties. We needed to have some respect and consideration for the uniqueness of geriatrics. But across the way, you've also been the editor of the Journal of Geriatric Physical Therapy. We've also noted that you've written a prolific book that's, I believe you said, in its fifth edition on orthotics and prosthetics. We talk about your contributions to movement systems. Now, more recently, your contributions to the annual mobility assessment. So, I want to give you an opportunity to reflect on some of those gifts and contributions in any way you want to take that volunteerism, passions, etc. But also just want to take a moment to thank you for those contributions that you have and are continuing to make. So thank you very much for that. And again, I don't know that I've got a question. Just if you can reflect back for us on the things that you've contributed here, what would you like to say to people about those?
I don't think of myself as someone who's particularly ambitious. I
Okay.
never would have thought about my new physical therapy self when I graduated doing any of those kinds of things.
Mhm.
A lot of it was recognizing the folks, the creative and smart and innovative folks around me
Mhm.
and riding on their coattails a bit. Um, you know, my guiding principle has always been to be of service. That's like
Mm.
really important to me to
I.e.,
help and
Sacred
be of
Heart.
service.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
when I first got involved in the academy, I think involvement in the Academy of Geriatrics has been a cornerstone with everything that I've done,
Mhm.
pretty much. And when someone said, "Oh, we have this need. Do you think you could help us with it?" I reflect a bit and say, "Well, I don't know, but maybe." And the maybe was enough to say, "Okay, I'll give it a shot." Especially with the journal editorship. I mean, I had not even published very much um, at that point. I mean, I had done the first and second edition of the textbook, but I hadn't really, and I'm not a particularly prolific manuscript provider, but it, you know, I said, "Oh, that would be interesting. It would be a way to make sure I was into the literature. So, okay.
Yeah.
John Byer was president of the Academy at that point,
Yep.
and I think he worked on me for about 2 years before I finally said yes. But evidently he saw something that might work, and
Yeah.
I was, you know, Richard, who preceded and followed me in the editorship, is a very much better organized person. Um, and so I'm proud that I was maybe the catalyst to get us to go online, to have
Mm.
an online submission project because I
Mhm.
couldn't manage his
Yeah.
organization it used to all be paper. People would submit multiple copies of paper manuscripts, and then I would have to mail them out to
Yeah.
folks to review. So I'm happy that my difficulty in keeping organized was the catalyst for I'm sorry, my cat just decided he should join the interview.
Didn't even see him. Yeah.
um and I think it's just, figure out what your core value is. For me,
Yeah.
being useful, being of service is the
Yeah.
thing that motivates me, and then act on it.
Yeah.
Think about the people that are around you who have similar interests or values, and take chances.
Wow. I'm just going to take a moment to breathe here and just reflect because it's powerful. Michelle, you have and continue to have a career of volunteerism, of probably erring on the side of humility more than you need to have. You say, I'm not a prolific author, but you've written a book that had two editions at that time. Why did they choose me? And you've also stated the importance, and I think this is one of the greatest things that anyone at any stage in their career can hear from you is you learn how to maximize the opportunities of the environment you are currently in. First year, pediatrics, didn't feel great. I'm going to pivot. Second year, husband went over elsewhere. You moved to Yukon. You maximized. They needed this. They needed that. Then the PT program needed something to step in, to fill in for a sabbatical. You step in and you move in with that. You found ways to maximize at every point you were at, and you did so by being flexible, adaptable, by being growth mindset. Yeah, I can help that. Kathy Seelek, we need a journal editor. Okay, I can help out. You say to yourself, I can't handle all these papers. We got to we got to get this done electronically. You found ways to maximize your skill set through volunteerism, through adaptability, and through humility. What a beautiful through line, because it identically matches the analogy of your time with your patient. We can't get this done up here on this bed. Let's go find another place to do it. And what's it do? It creates something beautiful out of it. I mean, it's the analogy of everything you've done that you described to us so far. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you make me sound like a hero. I am absolutely not that. I'm
Well,
just, I'm a person that has had wonderful mentorship, wonderful opportunities. I'm very grateful. I look back on my career and I'm proud. Um, I'm not done.
yes.
I think, although I enjoy retirement, the thing I like most about it is making the decision about what I want to put my energy into, that I don't
Yeah,
have to do everything
that's great.
anymore. Um, but once a PT, always a PT.
Yeah.
And I've been blessed by this incredible career over time.
Yeah.
I am grateful for the opportunities that I've had,
Yeah.
and I'm happy that even though I have white hair now, people are still interested in hearing what I have to say. So,
Yes, ever more so. Um, Michelle, thank you so much for your time today. And I hope this felt inviting and relaxed. I knew you were a little bit nervous about it going in, but now you've
Hmm.
got your cat in your lap,
Yep.
and the interview is wrapped up. And I hope you feel supported and valued and seen. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you for asking me to be part of this, Mike. I enjoyed it. I'm not nervous now. It's over.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right. Take care.